You were not born broken. The beliefs that tell you you're not good enough, the fears that paralyze you, the patterns that keep repeating, these are not your truth. They are complexes, unconscious emotional programs shaped by pain, trauma, and unmet needs. They operate in the background, hijacking your thoughts, behaviors, and self-worth. And the worst part, you start to think that's just who you are. But it's not. These inner blocks are not your destiny. They're just unprocessed fragments of your story. When you learn to face them, feel them, and free them, something powerful happens. Your real self begins to emerge. The self that is whole, confident, and free. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about reclaiming yourself. Because healing isn't becoming someone new. It's remembering who you were before the complex took over. A complex isn't just a passing thought or insecurity. It's an entire emotional structure built around pain that was never acknowledged, processed, or healed. It begins in childhood, often quietly. Maybe you were told you were too much, not enough, or simply ignored when you needed connection. These moments didn't vanish. They formed emotional imprints in your unconscious. Over time, these imprints grew into patterns, reflexive emotional reactions, overthinking loops, and deep-rooted beliefs like, I'm not lovable, I'll always be abandoned, or I have to earn love. These are not logical conclusions you made. They are emotional conclusions your wounded self was forced to accept to survive. Each complex contains a wound, a fear, and a compensating behavior. For instance, if your emotional wound is rejection, the complex might push you into people-pleasing just to avoid abandonment. If you were humiliated or ignored, your complex might make you hide your talents or play small, so you don't risk being seen. These reactions feel natural because they formed during your most vulnerable years, but they aren't who you really are. They are the survival masks your psyche created to protect your pain. The mind stores these complexes in the unconscious, meaning they show up without your awareness. You're not choosing to sabotage your relationships, freeze in fear, or stay stuck in the same job or cycle. You're reacting from a deeper place that was never healed. That's why willpower alone doesn't break the pattern. Until you identify and heal the emotional wound underneath, the complex will continue to control you. Often we don't even recognize the complex, we just feel off. We don't know why we overreact to criticism, shut down in intimacy, or feel anxious when we're not productive. But beneath each of these behaviors lies an emotional wound, something in your story that never got the safety, attention, and processing it deserved. That unhealed wound becomes a trigger point. It activates the complex, and suddenly, you're not responding from your present self. You're reacting from your wounded self. The key is realizing that your complex is not your personality, it's a defense. That angry voice, that self-doubt, that perfectionism, none of that is your essence. It's the echo of past emotional pain that got frozen in time. And the longer the wound stays hidden, the more power the complex has over your life. Healing begins when you stop identifying with the complex and start asking, what pain is this protecting? Maybe it's grief you never got to express. Maybe it's shame you internalized as a child, or a need for love that was constantly denied. Once you locate the wound, you can give it what it never got: validation, compassion, space to feel and release. But it's not just about soothing the wound. It's about seeing how that wound shaped your behaviors, how it altered the course of your choices, your identity, your relationships. When you recognize this, something powerful happens. You stop blaming yourself for being broken, and you start seeing the truth. You've been surviving, not living. Complexes are not evidence of weakness. They are evidence of your strength. Your mind created them to protect you from feeling what you weren't ready to handle. But now, as an adult, you have the power to revisit that pain, not to get stuck in it, but to free yourself from it. You no longer need the old emotional armor. You don't have to let an outdated wound run your present life. This process takes courage. It means slowing down when everything in you wants to run. It means sitting with discomfort instead of numbing it. But this is the doorway to freedom. The more honestly you feel your old pain, the less grip it has on you. The more you connect with the wounded part of you, the less power your complex holds. It begins to dissolve, and in its place your authentic self starts to rise. Because beneath every complex is a truth that's been buried. You are already enough. Already whole. Already worthy of love, peace, and belonging. The complex didn't tell you that. It told you the opposite. But now you get to rewrite the script, not by denying your wounds, but by healing them. Because once the emotional wound is healed, the complex loses its foundation. And when the complex dissolves, what's left is you, unfiltered, free, and fully alive. Avoidance is one of the most deceptive ways the psyche keeps you stuck. When something within you feels too overwhelming, too shameful, or too painful to face, your unconscious mind builds a wall around it. That wall becomes the avoidance, and ironically, it strengthens the very thing you're trying to escape. Complexes thrive in avoidance. They grow in the dark, in the silence, in the places you refuse to look. Every time you distract yourself, suppress the emotion, or deny the issue, the complex quietly becomes more powerful, shaping your reactions, decisions, and identity from the background. The more you avoid a feeling like fear, sadness, shame, or anger, the more you signal to your unconscious mind that it's dangerous, and what feels dangerous gets stored deeper. The body holds it. The nervous system reacts to it. the ego builds defenses around it. That's why your triggers become more intense over time, not less. Avoidance doesn't erase pain, it just buries it alive. And buried pain always returns, through anxiety, burnout, depression, overreactions, and patterns that repeat like a script you're forced to follow. Let's say you feel deeply unworthy, but instead of facing that belief, you become obsessed with achievement, or you avoid intimacy because closeness activates your fear of abandonment. On the surface it looks like you're just busy, focused, guarded, but underneath your complex is alive and running the show. Avoidance may bring short-term relief, but it guarantees long-term suffering, because what you resist doesn't just persist, it takes control. Avoidance can also wear a spiritual mask. You might tell yourself you've moved on, or you're being positive, but the wound is still there, hiding under the surface. It shows up in your body, a tight chest, restless nights, chronic tension. It shows up in your relationships, why you pull away, lash out, or feel misunderstood. And it shows up in your goals, why you self-sabotage just when things are going well. All of this is the voice of the complex, not your conscious self, and the longer you avoid facing it, the louder it gets. Every time you refuse to look inward, the complex learns how to hide better. It adapts. It becomes part of your internal landscape, so familiar that you think, this is just who I am. But it's not. It's who you became to avoid what hurt. That's a massive difference. Complexes aren't just patterns, they're protective systems, and avoidance is the fuel that keeps those systems running. The paradox is that healing only begins when you do the opposite of what your complex wants. You turn toward the pain instead of away from it. You feel what you were never allowed to feel. You let the tears come. You admit the fear. You name the shame. It doesn't break you, it breaks the illusion that you're too fragile to handle it. In reality, you're not avoiding because you're weak. You're avoiding because no one taught you how to face pain safely. But now, you have a choice. Avoidance may have protected you in the past, but now it's your prison. The longer you avoid, the more the complex defines your identity. It convinces you that you're incapable, unworthy, broken, and because those beliefs remain unchallenged, they harden into your sense of self. But here's the truth. What you avoid isn't who you are. It's where you got hurt. And facing that pain doesn't destroy you, it liberates you. To begin breaking this cycle, notice your avoidance strategies. Do you overwork, overthink, numb out, scroll endlessly, always stay busy? Do you feel anxious when you're alone with your thoughts? These aren't random behaviors, they're signals. They're pointing to something inside that needs your presence, not your distraction. Healing requires slowing down, becoming honest, and giving attention to the exact place you've been avoiding. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's also the most powerful thing you'll ever do. Because when you finally face the wound, the complex begins to dissolve. Not instantly, not perfectly, but gradually, in layers. You become less reactive. You reclaim your emotional space. You realize you're not the fear, not the trigger, not the story. The complex told you. Avoidance says, if I feel this, I'll fall apart. Truth says, if I feel this, I'll finally come back together. That's the turning point. And when you stop running, you start reclaiming your life from the complex that was never meant to define you. Before anything can change, it must first be seen. That's the golden rule of inner healing. You cannot transform what you're unconscious of. Complexes thrive in the dark. They operate through you without your permission, manipulating your behaviors, emotions, and decisions like invisible strings. And the moment you become aware of them, not just intellectually but emotionally, you interrupt their power. You step out of autopilot. You start to see the pattern, not as your identity but as a wound asking to be healed. Awareness doesn't fix everything overnight, but it's the beginning of all freedom. Without it, you live in a loop. You keep attracting the same relationships, feeling the same emotions, hitting the same walls and wondering why. But when awareness enters, the loop becomes a mirror. You begin to recognize your triggers. You notice the shift in your body when someone criticizes you. You hear the inner voice that says you're not good enough. You become conscious of the subtle ways you abandon yourself to be liked, stay silent to avoid conflict, or seek validation just to feel okay. These are not random behaviors, they are clues, and awareness allows you to follow them to their source. Awareness is not judgment. It's not about labeling yourself as broken or flawed. It's about watching with compassion. It's about saying, there you are. When the complex rises again, you observe instead of react. You breathe instead of spiral. This space between trigger and reaction is where healing begins, because the complex loses power when you stop blindly obeying it, and that starts with simply noticing. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is the essence of why awareness is liberation. When you're unaware of your inner blocks, they feel like destiny. You think, this is just the way I am, or this is how life always treats me. But once you become aware, you start to question that narrative. You realize that what felt like fate was often just an unhealed part of you playing itself out in different forms. There's something sacred about naming what's been hidden. When you can say this shame comes from a childhood wound, or this anxiety isn't who I am, it's a response to trauma, you reclaim your authorship. You're no longer acting from programming, you're choosing from consciousness. That choice is your power. Even if the pattern doesn't go away instantly, your relationship to it changes. It no longer defines you, and that inner shift, though invisible, changes everything around you. Think of your inner world like a dark room. The complex is something lurking in the corner, shaping your fear. The moment you turn the light on, it loses its shape. It might still be there, but now you can see it for what it is. You can approach it, understand it, even talk to it. Awareness gives you tools. It gives you space. It gives you sovereignty. Many people wait until they hit rock bottom to wake up. That's when awareness slaps them awake. The panic attack, the emotional breakdown, the shattered relationship. But you don't have to wait for a crisis to become conscious. You can begin right now, by becoming curious. Where do I react the most? What emotion do I avoid the most? When did I first feel like this? What belief is silently running this situation? Awareness is not an endpoint, it's a practice. A muscle you strengthen every time you pause, reflect and feel, and the more you practice it, the faster you catch the complex when it rises. Instead of spiraling for days, you name it in minutes. Instead of repeating the same fight, you shift your response. Over time, you don't just gain insight, you gain freedom. You begin to live in alignment with who you truly are, not who your wounds told you to be. Real liberation doesn't start with external changes, it starts with internal seeing. When you shine light on your deepest patterns, you realize that you are not the pain. You are the one who notices the pain. You are not the complex. You are the one becoming aware of the complex. And that means you have power over it. You can shift it, challenge it, and eventually release it. So if you feel stuck, if the same emotions haunt you, if the same stories play on repeat, pause, become still, ask yourself, what is this trying to teach me about myself? That simple question, asked with sincerity, is the beginning of liberation. Because in that moment, you're not just surviving your inner world, you're reclaiming it. You don't heal by replaying the same story that broke you, you heal by rewriting it. And to rewrite the story, you must reclaim the pen. Complexes, those deep emotional imprints that shaped you through pain, trauma, and repetition, thrive on a fixed narrative. I'm not enough, people always leave me, I can't trust anyone, or I'll never change. These stories don't just live in your mind, they become the lens through which you see the world, the script you unconsciously act out in every relationship, every decision, every self-doubt. To reclaim your power, you must challenge those scripts. You must become the author, not the character locked in a loop. Most people don't realize that their inner story is not truth, it's memory, interpretation, emotion, and repetition fused together. And complexes feed on repetition. They whisper the same thing every time you fail, every time you're rejected, every time life doesn't go as planned. Without awareness, you believe the voice. You live as if you are what the story says you are, and in doing so, you keep reinforcing it. This is why reclaiming your power is not just about motivation, it's about narrative transformation. Rewriting the narrative doesn't mean pretending the pain didn't happen. It means giving new meaning to it. It means going back into the memory not as a victim but as a witness. You see where the belief began, and instead of blaming yourself, you bring compassion. You challenge the story. Was it really my fault? Was I really unlovable? Or was I just a child trying to survive? When you shift the meaning of the story, you shift its grip on you. The complex loses its foundation. Think of your mind like a theater. Complexes are the scripts written in childhood or emotional trauma. You've been playing the same role for years, but now you pause. You walk off stage. You pick up the script and start editing. What if I'm not the one who gets abandoned but the one who learns to stay with herself? What if I'm not broken but in the middle of becoming whole? This is where power returns. Not because life changed, but because you changed the way you relate to your story. This isn't just about affirmations. It's about facing the raw, honest emotion behind the story and speaking directly to it. It's about returning to the moment the complex formed and saying to that younger part of you, I believe you. I see why you felt that way, but I'm not leaving you in that story. We're writing a new one together. That is real power. Not denial, not avoidance, transformation through truth and compassion. The more you rewrite your story, the more your identity shifts. Instead of identifying with the complex, you begin to identify with the self that is aware of the complex. That's the self who can choose. That's the self who can respond instead of react. That's the self who realizes, just because I feel unworthy doesn't mean I am unworthy. That's just the old script. I'm writing something else now. You might still feel the emotions. You might still get triggered, but now you have a new context. Triggers become teachers, not enemies. Pain becomes a doorway, not a prison. You begin to see how every block was guarding a deeper truth about who you really are, and by rewriting the narrative, you uncover that truth layer by layer. This process is not quick. Some parts of the story are etched deep, but every time you catch yourself repeating an old belief and choose a new one, you weaken the complex, you strip it of its authority, and slowly a new story emerges, one that's rooted in wholeness, not wounds. You don't need to become someone else to heal. You need to become fully yourself, the self you were before the story was written for you, the self who doesn't shrink to fit someone else's script, the self who remembers her worth without needing proof. The self who stops waiting to be saved because she realizes she's always had the pen in her hand. Reclaiming power is not about controlling the world. It's about changing your relationship to your own inner world. It's about realizing that even if the past can't be changed, your interpretation of it can, and in doing so you free yourself, not just from the complex but from the identity it trapped you in. So today pause, listen to the narrative running in your mind. Ask yourself, whose story is this? Does it still serve me? Who would I be without this belief? Then begin to write the answer, not in fantasy but in bold, conscious, compassionate truth. That's how you reclaim your power. That's how you become free.